Welcome back. Well, Joe Biden's decision unilaterally to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan led, of course, to the Taliban taking back control of the country in absolutely short order, and left, of course, close military allies, people like the United Kingdom, the rest of the NATO members, scratching their heads and asking a question: could they really trust America? Since then, we've seen some pretty bellicose statements from the Chinese about Taiwan, and there are increasing tensions on Ukraine's border, where President Putin has tens of thousands of troops massed. That was why I asked Trump, where now is America's place on the world stage? Let's remind ourselves what he had to say.
Where is America in the world right now?
I think it's at the lowest point it's ever been at. I don't think it's ever been in a position like this. We're not respected anymore. I will tell you, there were no planes flying over Taiwan. And the name wasn't even mentioned. You didn't talk about Taiwan when I was president. It wasn't going to happen, what they're doing now.
Well, joining me to discuss those comments of Donald Trump's, and indeed the wider debate about where is America now with its allies, where is it on the world, has it now withdrawn under President Biden, which ironically is what people in 2016 said was what Donald Trump was going to do. Well, joining me is Christian Whiton. And Christian, you've been an advisor to the Trump administration on international policy. When Donald Trump says that America's standing in the world right now is the lowest that it's ever been, is that overstating the case, or is he right?
You know, I think it's pretty close to. It's an academic argument as to whether we were worse off after the fall of Saigon, after the humiliation of the United States there, occurring at, right in the middle of the Cold War, frankly. But this is pretty close to it. Vietnam was a long time coming, a complex issue made harder by a radical Democratic Congress that cut off funds to the South Vietnamese government. This in Afghanistan really is an unforced error. It's Joe Biden's doing. It's something that was ordered from the White House. It's something that cannot be blamed on Congress or the French or on events beyond our control, as you might be able to blame the fall of Saigon. And if you look around the world, the Biden administration says America is back, and they tend to think that attending things is the equivalent of power. So showing up in Glasgow, showing up recently, our Secretary of State in Riga at the NATO conference, Biden even saying, well, we're here, we're attending things, as if that's a substitute for real power in the world. I don't think our adversaries buy it, and I don't think our friends buy it.
No, America is back. It looks almost farcical, doesn't it? Because we, the United Kingdom, we have been side by side with America, and you with us, on virtually, not all, but virtually every major conflict going back to 1917. We've shed a lot of blood and gold together, trying to achieve, common causes and common goals. And what I found astonishing was no reference whatsoever to the British Prime Minister. And when Boris Johnson calls Joe Biden to discuss what's going on as Kabul is about to fall, it takes Biden 36 hours to ring him back. Is this an American president that is contemptuous of the military and indeed, importantly, intelligence relationship with the United Kingdom? And I want to add on to that, Christian, if I may, what does all of this mean for NATO?
Right. Well, Biden, these are his guys, the G7, Western Europe. There's some of us in the United States, I would exclude Britain from this category, but saying we should give less attention to old Europe. They're less important. The EU is not going to do us any favors. And allies that are more important in this point of the 20th century, 21st century are, for example, the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Taiwan and Japan. Those are the people that are more relevant to deterring China. But Biden doesn't agree with that. He thinks Western Europe is the most important, our traditional allies. And so for him to neglect Britain as he has done and to essentially consult with none of our key NATO allies in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think is a slap in the face and inconsistent with his own stated preferences. Where does it leave NATO? NATO, I think, is already obsolete and on life support. The Russians, I don't want to sound like an apologist, they didn't think NATO was going to come right up to their border when they agreed to the unification of Germany as the Eastern Bloc and then the Soviet Union collapsed. So NATO has taken on more and more obligations but in so doing actually has become seemingly less and less relevant. The idea that we would go and have World War III over Ukraine, I think, would be a surprise to most Americans. So you're left with an alliance that Donald Trump tried to help by trying to make it meet its own commitments on spending that is now essentially adrift.
Biggest concern, Christian, I've got in the world is Taiwan. I said in the introduction that China's comments about Taiwan are increasingly bellicose. Just explain, please, to our audience the sort of rather complex relationship that America has with Taiwan and its defense, and whether, in the event of some Chinese incursion, you think a Biden administration would do anything about it. And I ask those things because, as the world's main manufacturer of semiconductors, if China was to take over Taiwan, they could virtually close the motor vehicle industry in the whole of the Western world. I mean, this really matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, close all of big tech too. You know, your phone may not be available, a replacement for your phone. You know, we do have a complex history with Taiwan. Basically, we stuck it to them, beginning with Nixon, but then in particular in the Carter administration, because we wanted relations with communist China at a key point during the Cold War, when job number one, and frankly, job number 2, 3, 4, and 5 was to stick it to the Soviet Union, to deter the Soviet Union as a way of preventing war. And we wanted to divide China from the Soviet Union, and it worked. And when we established relations with China, it caused Russia to actually pull some forces from Eastern Europe to redirect them towards China. We might want to do the opposite of that now today, and frankly find a way to find some common interest with Russia in order to separate it from China. Anyway, 1979, we break relations with Taiwan, but Congress passes a law that year, the Taiwan Relations Act, saying that we have to sell Taiwan the arms it needs for self-defense. So we have a de facto alliance, but not one that's explicit. Now, Joe Biden has done what previous presidents have not done. He said we were going to defend Taiwan if they were attacked by China. That would replace some of the strategic ambiguity, as it's been called, that we have. The problem is no one believes that. And Biden's own White House, his own spokeswoman, and his own State Department walked that back and said, oh, our policies really haven't changed. So it's clear as mud. I think you look at China to know what the reality is. If China thought we were actually making an explicit defense agreement with Taiwan, they would be just jumping up and down mad. Instead, they don't really care, because I think they know that Joe Biden is just misspeaking at best case scenario. And also, you know, the pullout from Afghanistan, Biden said that was to shift forces from Central Asia to the Western Pacific to East Asia. That hasn't happened. The Pentagon just put out a report that says basically we're going to do a little bit with bases in Guam and Australia. Nothing serious that would upset the Chinese.
Christian Whiton, thank you very much for coming on and discussing America's place in the world under Joe Biden.